What's happening, guys? This is Mike at Mike's Total Dragon Channel, and today I thought we would take a look at the first issue of the Xmen. I like to do a thing where I take a look at first appearances and see how their characters look when they first appeared versus how they look now, in their most recognizable form. And I thought this issue here, Xmen #1, which has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, including Professor X, 7 first appearances overall, would be really cool to take a look at, compare them how they debuted in Xmen #1 in 1963 versus how they are portrayed today. Also, I found this book in the dollar box at a comic book shop here near me, so that was another factor in choosing to go with the X-Men. So we'll go ahead and start this up, and we see Cyclops, Iceman, Angel, Beast, Professor X here. And as was the style at the time, we have a lot of dialogue, people explaining what they're doing, people showing their powers off for the readers, as that just really made the book very accessible. So we see here, we see the Beast. He has incredible agility. So we see here balance, and he's doing flips, and he's got speed or whatever. So we see him, and that is very much on brand with the Beast that we see today. But obviously the biggest difference is he is not fuzzy and blue, which is the version of the Beast that we know the most. The one that experimented upon himself, turned himself blue, turned himself full of fur. And another thing is, I don't see any instances of him displaying his huge intellect, because the other part of his mutation is the fact that he's a genius. He's incredibly brilliant. Here he kind of seems a little bit like a Ben Grimm brawler type. Hey, come on, have a heart. I was only trying to be friendly. A fella could get dizzy up here. Let me down, huh? This is embarrassing. Oof. So this kind of really feels like something that you would see with the Thing, or early portrayal of the Thing. So I don't think the Beast, the version they have here, is quite as defined as we would meet later on, which is to be expected. Now, Iceman, here his form is very much like snow. It does not look like pure ice, like we see right here. And right here we really see him looks more like a snowman, as opposed to the ice form that he has nowadays. But outside of that, the power set, making ice constructs, making this ice like a force field type of shield or whatever, and the portrayal of him being basically like the jokester, the youngest member of the group, and a very lighthearted individual, someone that cracks jokes and doesn't take the situation very seriously. That's very on brand for him. So I would say with Iceman, they really got his portrayal. His portrayal from the first time we see him to what it is now is basically the same. Obviously they've increased his powers somewhat, but his overall personality and the general abilities that he has remains the same. So I would say that was very successful. Here we see Cyclops. Look, you two clowns, be more careful next time. That bowling ball just missed the professor by a whisker. That kind of horseplay isn't funny. So we see him using his powers, his optic blast, and we also see his personality as being the leader, being very serious, being very mission focused. Essentially the professional that he is, you know, that's the reason he was chosen to be leader. So I would say Cyclops is yet another instance of someone that was his portrayal. Now we see him, except he, no one's dressing like this anymore. So the portrayal we see of Cyclops right now is very much still very similar to the one that we have now. Obviously, the Cyclops we have now is a little bit more. What's the word I'm looking for here? He's been through more shit, so to speak. So he's a little bit more aggressive. But outside of that, he's essentially the same character he is right here. Professor X, we see him in the leadership role, and he's kind of giving a little bit of history to everyone. I was born of parents who had worked on the first A-bomb project. Like yourselves, I am a mutant, possibly the first such mutant. I have power to read minds and project my own thoughts into the brains of others. But I was young, normal people feared me, distrusted me. I realized the human race is not yet ready to accept those with extra powers. So that's basically his mission statement for everyone he's put together here. His radicalized youth. So that Professor X is basically the same we have now. His powers are definitely a lot more stronger now than they were then, and also he can walk, which is a big difference than the way he's portrayed here, where he's just in a wheelchair. So I would say that overall Professor X is another example of someone they kind of got right with issue 1. Now, someone that they did not get, someone who's went through a ton of changes since they first appeared, would be Warren Worthington III, the Angel. His superpower was basically he had wings so he could fly. Now that is not a very dynamic superpower, just being able to fly because you have wings and that's it. And I think that is why we have seen him become more popular as the Archangel character, whose wings are razor blades and he can shoot knives out of those wings. So that is the type of character that I feel like they have really improved upon since his first issue, because he doesn't have, Angel that is, he does not have enhanced strength. He just basically could fly. And that, in comparison with a lot of the mutants that have come since then, is a very passive type of power to have. It does not lead to very dynamic fight scenes. So I can see why they made the change to give him the razor wings and turn him into Archangel. So I believe that, it makes the character a lot more exciting and a lot more fun to draw in a fight scene. So I think that's an instance in which what the changes they've made to him have really worked out for the better. Who else do we have here? So Jean Grey, she's another character who has went through a million changes. She is portrayed here as being telekinetic. Like she says here, now I must admit it's a pleasure to be able to practice telekinesis openly Without fear of being discovered, observe that book, that power of thought. I'm able to move objects at will. So, Jean Grey, she still does have telekinetic powers. She also has developed telepathy. In this early issue here, I believe she is just strictly telekinetic. And also her personality is kind of bland. She is kind of portrayed the way the female characters were portrayed here in books in the 60s. Not as, what's the word I'm looking for here? They didn't have full roles. They weren't fully accepted by the rest of the men on the team. Like I remember in some of the early Avengers books, they had Wasp bringing a tray of cookies to everybody, or maybe that was in a Justice League book. But I will say that Jean Grey here, as far as her just having telekinetic powers, that's still very accurate. They don't portray her telepathy and the powers that she's gotten from having spent time with the Phoenix, which is a whole different ball club or ball game altogether. So I would say that Jean Grey at her first appearance versus how she is now, not very similar at all. She was very much just the new female member of the team, as opposed to now where she is accepted as her own hero, and she is someone who has carried the mantle of the Phoenix. So she has grown a lot since this first appearance here, so much so that I think that she has evolved quite a bit from the way she was initially portrayed. Now, speaking of someone who has evolved quite a bit since they initially portrayed, the last first appearance they have here is Magneto. Magneto in this very first issue here is just a typical Silver Age bad guy. He has the costume on. He's monologuing. I feel the irresistible waves of pure magnetic energy surging from me. Now, by exerting every iota of power, I can direct that energy upward until it strikes the missile, causing it to change direction, to falter. So he here, Magneto that is, he is just a very typical bad guy at the time. He does not have the level of depth, and he is not. Look, there's so many words in this panel. Magneto's covered up right here. That's awesome. Magneto monologued so hard he covered his own self up. But the Magneto that we see now, that we know as being the Holocaust survivor, someone whose family died basically in front of him, who survived the horrors of Magneto survived the horrors of Nazi Germany, and it left him incredibly changed. We don't see any of that right here. Basically, he is a two-dimensional, villain, so to speak. There's no difference between this version of Magneto than you would see in any, Silver Age Justice League book or a Green Lantern book or anything like that. He's just very two-dimensional. The things that make him, like the relationship that he has with Professor X and the, things, his beliefs, and the fact that humanity will never accept mutants, and the fact that he says that he's seen all this before, that humanity will ultimately destroy mutant kind, and he's seen it before, having lived through Nazi Germany. So none of that's here. So he's just, like I said, he's just a two-dimensional character, generic villain. Nowhere near the type of character of depth and complexity that we'll see later on down the line in X-Men. But that is X-Men #1. And I would say that the characters that they got right, that we still see and recognize, is Professor X, Cyclops, Iceman. Those are the characters that still to this day in 2025 are very similar to what they were presented here in the first issue. The characters of Angel, Beast, Magneto, Jean Grey all have grown and changed incredibly since their first appearance right here in 1963, and are better versions than what were displayed right here. So until next time, that is it. You guys take care. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.